morning, beautiful people. My normal work is on anthropology and archaeology and history, and decolonization and anti-race theory, of course. But I also have some other things that are very important to me, dealing with abuse and suicide prevention. So today I want to talk to you about the last one. Now, if you've seen my more recent videos, or if you've been in my more recent lives, you know that I lost a sibling to suicide on May 1st. This has left me with a lot of sorrow, of course, but for me, in large part because I didn't get a chance to know this sibling, as they are part of my biological father's family, and I didn't know who my biological father was until 2020. Also in large part because they were dealing with very similar situations and very similar feelings to what I have gone through in the past. And I was lucky enough to be able to figure out a way more recently to not go through those feelings again. And I wish that when they had reached out, I had spoken to them. So I want to talk about my experiences, and maybe, in them you will find a way to reach the same space that I did. I myself have been suicidal since I was 15 years old and lost a significant other that I had been living with for 1.5 years at that point. I had suffered from depression without realizing what it was before. I have thought that I was the monster for most of my life. I was actually probably in my early 40s before I realized that I was the type of person that I expected other people to be if they were good people, and so therefore I must be a decent human being. Up until that point, I thought I was a monster. Very little in my life seemed to have changed that thought process in my head. I am a war vet. I have military sexual trauma PTSD. I've gone through 2 shitty marriages, and one of them was to somebody who was highly abusive to me and my children. And I come from a family where narcissistic tools were used because narcissistic tools have been used on them. And so I also, being a Pisces, I, as you know, like all the other shit on top, had a lot of depression, and I have since I was 15 years old. At the end of my last marriage, suffering from PTSD, suffering from abuse, suffering from MST PTSD, and never having gotten help for any of that, and watching as my world crumbled around me, and I was running from a bad situation and was trying to save my children from a bad situation, and instead ended up leaving my children in a bad situation without my protection anymore. And that left me in a headspace that was pretty desperate. Now, I have been suicidal off and on since 15 till my first birth child happened when I was 20. And at 20, I realized that I had a life to take care of, and I couldn't off myself because the pain that she would have to carry with her was inappropriate of me. And I had one brief thing in an argument with my parents later on where I was just like, fuck, I'm just worthless. But it wasn't until I was 38 and was getting a divorce and was losing everything that I valued that I really got to a point where I was once again suicidal. At this point of time, I realized that there was no way that I could kill myself because I had children, and I couldn't leave them with that burden. And so I started to think of how I could make it accidental. Initially, it was right after a court hearing, and I thought that I could, I was crying so hard, and I was driving fast, and there was cliffs everywhere, right? And that's really always the way I think that I had planned since I could drive. But I pulled out of that because depression that's chronic comes in cycles. And then I lost again. And I am not a violent person. But sitting in the courtroom in my last loss, where I realized that the state thought that I was a druggie, which I wasn't, and an abuser and a whore, which I wasn't, and very, very much not a fuck you about the whore part, that I wanted to headbutt my husband and watch the blood stream down his face. I was so angry, and I was so betrayed, and I was so hurt by the world around me. And then a few days later, this is after I have signed away custody of my kids because I'm not given any other option to somebody that I believe is abusive, and to this day know is abusive, that I was standing on a street corner in a city for the first time, because I've never lived in a city in my life. And the trains in this city come and go a lot. And I was like, if I step out, it's an accident and nobody knows. That is the last time in my life that I had a, not a plan, but a how I could, right? It's not the last time that I thought that I was so much the problem that I needed to end my life to save everybody else from the problem. That's Sarah. If you know me, you know that I do a lot of frontline work. When my PTSD gets bad or my world explodes, my first thought is it's me. And so 21, 22, I started getting really fucked in the head. Started seeking counseling, and I've done a lot of work. Through those times, the conclusion that I came to really the last time the conclusion I came to was, it's just not an option. And so when it would pop back up, I would go, it's just not an option, right? And it was just not an option because of the damage that it would cause. So through the work and through several more times of the pop of the thought in my head, I got to a point where I realized that if I was the problem, then I would just go to the middle of the woods. I can take care of myself. I'd thrive in the middle of the woods. Just go to the middle of the woods and I would remove the problem. So for me, it took understanding that suicide is not an option because of the impact it leaves behind, and finding another way to remove the problem, because for me, suicide was because I was the problem. So now I want to talk about the different things that go on in our head a little bit. Now, I don't know, most of you might know 5 of you. I don't really know the things that go on inside your heads, right? I do know things that I've heard. Now for me, once I realized that suicide was not the option, then I had to find a different way to remove the problem, because the problem was my issue. For someone else that I know, it was that they regretted everything and they were afraid of the steps that came next in their life. And I want to tell you with that the trite shit that life always changes. It's not going to get better all the time, right? But it changes. And if you're regretting the things in your life, then stepping up and making new things to not regret is a positive, right? But you still have to reach it in your own head. For some, it is somebody told them to, because there are shitty fucking humans in this world. And I want to tell those people that you are worth more to this world than the shitty people that told you should. Because if you are going to tell somebody they should kill themselves, then there's something wrong with you, not with the person that is getting told that, right? And a lot of times it is the thought that nobody loves us. I knew my brother for 2 years and had maybe 10 conversations, and I loved the fuck out of him. There are 1,000 people in this world that love you, and you don't even know it yet. So you have to take a deep breath and realize, now my solutions aren't going to work for you. You have to reach that point yourself. I'm only giving you ideas and hopefully opening a discussion so that maybe you can find the solution that works for you. You're worthy, and I love you, and I need you here. Please.